Once again, welcome to the War Room. After a long hiatus, we are back with a new episode of our Great Mongol Empire run, and if you would remember, in the last episode, we actually managed to restore the Great Pentarchy, thus uniting all Christian churches under Mongol patronage. Mongol rule now stretches over most of the Balkans and also practically all of Egypt, and even the great city of Rome is under Mongol administration as of the year 1571. Meanwhile, in the east, the Goryeo dynasty lives on as a mere rump state after most of Korea has been annexed to Mongol rule, and soon enough all of Korea shall be ruled directly from the Great Mongol capital in Hangzhou, which by the way is majority Orthodox as of now, and it's soon going to be majority Mongol culture as well. But of course, Korea is not our main target. Our main target lies beyond the sea in this particular island chain, which has caused great discomfort to the Mongol Empire previously. Our Mongol ancestors did attempt to conquer Japan twice, first in 1274 and then in 1281, but unfortunately a divine wind swept over the islands of Tsushima, and as a result, the Mongol horsemen simply perished in the open ocean. So hopefully it will not happen again, and in order to ensure that it does not happen again, we will first have to build up a proper navy in order to transport our Tumens over to the islands of Japan. Before we start with that particular naval invasion though, a quick reminder that if you've been enjoying this series so far, you might consider subscribing to the channel so you get notified when a new episode releases. And if you're feeling extremely generous today, you might even consider becoming a member to support me monetarily. Now, first things first, we have to do a little bit of housekeeping here, because of course we have conquered some lands in the west, and all of these areas still have most of their infrastructure intact, so we will have to destroy everything we can get in order to prevent the wealth from flowing into the coffers of potential rebel factions, especially the Venetian patriots who are preparing to rise up in the island of Euboea. So of course I'm going to destroy every single RGO in this region and close down all the urban buildings so that none of this area produces any more wealth. And I suppose it is time that we move from being a land-based empire to being a naval-based empire, for the simple reason that once we have managed to conquer Japan, it will be quite simple to just put a naval governor here in order to get additional proximity and control in an area which is highly wealthy, and we might even be able to get some additional control in southern Korea using a naval governor which is placed in Japan. At the same time, thanks to our position in the Aegean Sea, we will also be able to place a naval governor in one of these small Aegean islands, which will allow us to propagate proximity and control across the entire Balkans and shores of Anatolia, and perhaps even in the coastal regions of Egypt. So I'm going to start encouraging naval with a cabinet member, and in order to complement the work that he is doing, we will also have to switch away from some of these privileges and government reforms, which are pushing us significantly in the direction of land so far. So I'll start by handing out the shipwright contracts privilege to our burghers, which will progress us just a tiny little bit towards naval, allowing us to finally get some progress. And over time, we are going to replace most of these government reforms and also take away quite a few privileges that we have granted to the nobility and clergy and the burghers. We have also saved up quite a bit of money, so of course I'm going to start spending it, and we are going to start by building up all of these lovely little RGOs in the area around our capital. And I'm also going to start building up some of these urban production buildings, especially the guns workshops, which are going to come in handy in reducing the price of firearms, and by reducing the price of firearms, we will also be paying less in our expenses in order to maintain the hundreds of armies that we have scattered all across China. We shall also resume enforcing culture on some of our subjects in Russia, and I guess we can start with the Principality of Bryansk, who are going to become proper Mongols. And finally, we are going to remove our armies from the Kingdom of Hungary, because of course we are at peace with them now, and I'm going to reroute, let's say, 4 or 5 Tumens back to the east, where they're going to continue the conquest of Korea, and we're probably going to keep maybe 2 or 3 Tumens in the west, because we still have some unfinished business in Russia, and especially down here in Egypt. And due to a combination of our new conquests and some natural population growth, we have actually managed to accept a couple cultures here, specifically the Serbian, Khorasani, and the Ryazanian cultures, which does give us a huge number of cores, especially in Russia and in Khorasan, so those are definitely going to come in handy as we expand our influence further and further into Russia. Our stability has increased quite a bit because, of course, I'm buying it up, spending a lot of money, and that means we can change one of our government reforms. Even though the tailored urban rights government reform is one of the best in the game, and it gives us a lot of monthly development in urban locations, we will unfortunately have to switch away from it, and we will probably have to replace it with something that actually gives us naval push. So I'm actually going to switch away to the Admiralty regime government reform here, and it will change our succession node to Admiral election, which can actually cause some pretty hilarious issues, but it's going to be definitely worth it for the additional naval push that it gives us. In the meantime, we're also busy researching a bunch of advances that are unique to the Great Mongol Empire, such as Pax Mongolica, which reduces separatism, the Ghostly Horses of the Plain, that is such a metal advanced name by the way, which gives us plus 20% light cavalry power, and I believe we also get another 20% from a Golden Horde unique advance, so that's going to be 40%, 50% maybe even in total, and also reduced army attrition, increased manpower, and antagonism received. Now, none of these are particularly strong bonuses, except maybe the light cavalry power, but all of them combined make Mongolia a pretty neat formable overall. In the meantime, the 4 Tumans that we have relocated from our conquests in the west have arrived in Korea, and that means it is time for war against the Kingdom of Goryeo, so as usual I'm going to threaten war for their capital, which they will refuse, and that's going to put us into war with Goryeo, Veliki Novgorod, and the Sheikhdom of Hilla, because of course they're all part of the anti-Mongolian coalition. So against Novgorod, I'm just going to push through the border and use this single two-man to siege down their capital, and we will probably make a white peace with them so that we can come back in 5 years and take a bunch of land, assuming that our vassals create CBs for us. And down here, we're going to send this two-man to simply occupy the lands of Hilla, and of course they're going to be annexed. And finally, out here in the east, we're going to use our 4 two-mans in order to siege down the Korean forts, and we're going to fight them on until they declare unconditional surrender. This time around, we started occupying the Korean capital from day 1, which means they are unable to actually hire any mercenaries. And that also means we're only going to face their levies and their regulars in battle, and of their regulars we have managed to kill off an insane amount, because we have encountered them twice in the Battle of Seosan, and both victories were pretty significant for us. On the other hand, we did suffer a lot of casualties ourselves, so I'm going to retreat this two-man over to the northwest, we are going to regroup, and then we are going to use our other 3 two-mans in order to deal with the remaining Korean troops. The Korean capital has fallen, so it is just a matter of time before they surrender to us, and it appears that we have a chance to destroy their remaining levies, thus leaving them with only their regular troops. Although it turns out the Korean regulars were also in the field, so we managed to capture both the levies and the regulars, and we promptly got defeated. I presume we will have to use multiple two-mans in order to fight them in their capital, but once we manage to do that, it should be a pretty easy victory for us. And there we go, in fact we did not even have to use multiple two-mans, a single one was more than enough to send them retreating to their backlines, and of course I'm going to pursue their regulars in the hopes of finding out where they're going and destroying them in their eventual destination. And there we go, the Novgorodian capital has fallen after almost 7 months, so we should be able to make a separate peace with them once the year is over, and we will probably try to capture some more lands before that happens. In the east, we have managed to capture and destroy the entire remaining Korean levies, so now we just have to deal with their regulars, and would you look at that, their regulars are also quite under strength because of all the casualties that we've inflicted on them. And this might literally be the first time that I've actually fought a battle over a frozen over lake, which you definitely can do, especially in Russia. And it was of course a glorious Mongol victory where we destroyed the entire armies of the Republic of Veliki Novgorod, and they only have their regulars remaining, which are as usual under strength, because probably they suffered from some attrition. Right, this is probably going to be the decisive battle of the war, where we have two two-mans coming up from opposite sides, both of them trying to destroy the Korean forces, so let's see how it goes. It was a victory. Unfortunately, it wasn't a stack wipe, but there's nothing preventing us from pursuing the Koreans and destroying them in their destination. Or rather, there's nothing preventing us except for the fact that they have a bunch of forts in this area, so they probably escaped behind their zone of control, and that means we will have to siege down these forts and wait until they appear again, and at that point we should be able to destroy them in full. In the meantime, we actually managed to destroy the regulars of Novgorod as well, so they will probably be very much willing to peace us out. Yes, of course they are, and I'm just going to get a white piece from them because taking any sort of land is probably going to be rather costly. There we go, plus 50% cost for taking anything because we did not declare this war on Novgorod originally. So of course, white piece, and in 5 years we're going to come back and we're going to use our vassal CBs to destroy them for good. In the meantime, I'm going to relocate our two two-mans in the north over here to Egypt, and of course, as soon as our truce is over, we're going to deal with Egypt once and for all. And I'm also going to fully annex Hillah, the third member of the coalition, because we have managed to occupy all of their lands, and they do seem kind of odd in the map, especially considering all the land around them is owned by the Great Mongol Empire. So there we go, that makes for much prettier borders if you ask me. And the Kingdom of Goryeo have finally unconditionally surrendered to us, which is lovely because it gives us control over every single fort that they have, and we're going to piece them out very soon. And let me tell you, the war score cost here is just insane, off the roof. Even though the areas that we're taking have like 15 to 40% control in them, because of course we cut off the Korean capital, it still costs us so much to take them simply because of how much wealth there is in this area. I mean, this is just nuts. And I mean, I've stacked a bunch of war score cost efficiency modifiers as well, like we're getting stuff from belligerent, from being the military hegemon, from our rivalry against Goryeo, from the expansionist zealotry privilege, and from low control, and still it is not enough. We are still paying through the nose. Just look at that, 14 war score cost to take a single location. That's just insane. But anyways, we're still going to send a peace deal and take another bite out of Goryeo, and this area is probably close enough to our capital that we can get acceptable amounts of proximity and therefore control here, so it's probably going to be an actually valuable addition to our country and to our economy as compared to all the lands that we control, but we don't actually control. So there goes the peace deal, and with that ends the fourth, fifth, I have no idea how many times we've been at war with them, a war against Goryeo, and hopefully in another 3 to 4 wars, we should be able to fully annex them. So now that Korea has been pacified for the next 15 years, I believe it is time that we start working on our arrangements in order to land in Japan, and for that we are going to build another 40 transport ships in the East China Sea, to complement the ships that we already have in the Mediterranean and the large fleet of Mediterranean galleys that we have out here in the Eastern Ocean. Interestingly enough, neither the Ashikaga shogunate nor any of their breakaway Japanese states seem to have any regular navies, so we should easily be able to land on the islands of Japan, assuming that a divine wind does not simply swipe us into the shoreline of the Tsushima Islands. In the meantime, our truce with the Mamluk Sultanate of Egypt is over, and they even gave us the benefit of doubt by actually joining the coalition against us, so of course we are going to declare war on them before the coalition can grow any further, and as usual we're going to threaten war for their capital, which brings us into war with them and their Arabian and Makurian allies. I'm going to send this two-man over to Al-Qahira in order to siege down the megalopolis, and over here I'm going to use another two-man to destroy the Egyptian vassals and then occupy their capital. So that is one Egyptian vassal army down, and their capital is going to be occupied very soon, thus allowing us to prevent them from raising any mercenaries. Cairo fell pretty quickly. It hasn't even been 4 months since the start of the war, and that means we're going to start getting some ticking war score very soon. So I'm going to relocate our 2 men in the north down to the south in order to deal with the Egyptian stacks that have been raised in the area. Meanwhile, in Syria, we have managed to occupy Irbid, which is the capital of the Mamluk vassal Almira, so of course I'm going to destroy their remaining armies before moving on to occupying their other fortresses. And that should be basically the entire remaining army of Almira. They still have a couple thousand regulars hidden somewhere. Oh, there we go, there they are. And we are going to destroy this stack before moving on to occupying their remaining fortresses. And in the Battle of Buwit, the Mamluks suffered a crushing defeat, even though it was a Pyrrhic victory for us because we also suffered a lot of casualties. Oh, that is excellent. Plus 10% light cavalry power for a horde army is just massive, and it looks like we're going to defeat their Makurian allies next. Or maybe they're going to defeat us because we suffered a tremendous defeat, losing the entirety of a 2-man, and they even managed to capture our remaining auxiliaries. So we'll probably have to wait until our second 2-man from the north arrives in the region, and at that point we should be able to counter the Makurians first and then deal with the Mamluks. There we go, we have a new 2-man which has recently arrived in Egypt, and first I'm going to use them to deal with the Egyptian vassal armies before moving south along the Nile River Valley in order to destroy the Egyptian and Makurian stacks. So that should be the entirety of the Egyptian vassal armies. We managed to kill 35,000 men, which is quite a lot, and I'm going to retreat our 2 men from the west to go south where they can deal with the Makurians and the Egyptians. But it appears that the Makurians have raised a lot of mercenaries, so I'll probably have to call back a second 2-man from Syria, and with 2 2-mans we should easily be able to destroy all the remaining enemy forces. In the meantime, a single 2-man should be more than enough to destroy the Egyptian forces which have gathered at Asyut, and then when the second 2-man arrives we will be able to join up with them to destroy the remaining Makurian stacks. And that was an even easier victory than I anticipated. I'm guessing all the bonuses that we have to cavalry really add up together and allowed us to simply destroy the enemy armies all at once, and as soon as our second 2-man has arrived, the same fate is going to befall the Makurians. Or better yet, we don't even have to fight the Makurians because the Mamluks are actually willing to accept a full annexation as they are right now, and by fully annexing them, we will also inherit their entire vassal swarm, including Barqa, Cyprus, Almira, Mecca, Medina, and Suakin. So of course we are going to do exactly that. We are going to fully annex the Mamluks, thus completing our conquest of Egypt and bringing the entire eastern Mediterranean under our direct control. Now that the Mamluks are gone, this allows me to pick another rival, and of course I'm going to pick the Ashikaga Shogunate, because the invasion of Japan is coming up next. And let's see who our other rivals are actually. Looks like we have Hungary, Veliki Novgorod, and Goryeo. And I don't think we need to rival any of the other smaller Japanese clans, because all of them should be fully annexable in a single war, and simply having the Ashikaga Shogunate as a rival should be more than enough, because it will probably take us multiple wars to actually take all of their land. Well then, our western flank is secure, we still have a short truce with the Russians, and over here Korea has been pacified for the next decade at least, and that means we can focus the entirety of our efforts into the conquest of Japan. So of course we are going to declare war on the Ashikaga Shogunate, which will bring in a lot of their vassals slash daimyo who are basically independent at this point, but at the same time it's not going to bring all of them into the war, and because we have a couple daimyo that are not part of the war since they're at war with Ashikaga themselves, we will be able to declare war on them later down the line and bring in all of Japan into war with us once again. Of course, we have prepared a mighty invasion fleet along with 2 stacks of 2-mans, and we're going to land in the southwest of Japan, and we're slowly going to crawl our way up the island until we have reached the imperial capital. So we shall start over here by laying siege to the city of Mie, and at the same time I'm going to try and occupy the provincial capitals that Ashikaga has in this island, and we're also going to try and siege down the city of Mashike. In the meantime, we have two more Tumans which are ready to join us in the invasion, so of course we're going to send our navy back home to Korea, and we're going to ferry them over to this island down here, so we can start attacking Japan from multiple fronts. The first location to fall before our advancing armies is Kuwabara, and we are going to keep occupying the remainder of Kyushu until the entire island is under Mongol control. It turns out I was mistaken, and there is a single Japanese domain who have a proper navy, including a couple heavy ships. That is the domain of Aisu. None of the others. Oh wait, these guys also have some heavy ships and galleys. That's just interesting, because the first time I took a look in Japan, none of these guys had any navies, so I guess I either missed them, or maybe they just built them in the time period between me looking at them and me declaring the invasion. So of course we are going to have to retreat our navies over here, and we will probably try to march through the island of Kyushu before hopping over to the other islands. And we have won our first siege in Japan. The city of Mie has fallen before our troops, so I'm going to try and occupy the entirety of the domain of Nakatsu. I'm not quite sure if they count as a subject of Ashikaga, or whether we can get a separate peace with them if we actually manage to occupy their entire lands. The tooltip says that they're a loyal subject with limited diplomacy, but you know, the tooltips in this game regularly lie to you, so I guess we'll have to figure it out ourselves. In the meantime, we have also acquired more than 20 stability, and in fact I even got us up to 28 stability, so it would act as a buffer in case we get a nasty event. And that means we can replace yet another one of our government reforms, which are pushing us towards land. This time around we're actually going to go with the transportation code, which does progress us a little bit towards land, and it also gives us minus 10% building road costs. But at the same time we have managed to build up a lot of roads, so it's not going to be very useful, at least until the middle of the Age of Absolutism, so we're going to switch this away, and in its place we are going to adopt the provincial taxation system, which gives us plus 5% maximum tax to all of our estates, and that is going to be a massive boost to our economy once the government reform has been fully implemented. Well, it looks like the Japanese are on the counter-offensive, because they have managed to land some troops in the island of Kyushu, so of course they will have to be hunted down and destroyed, because our dominance over the island should be secured immediately. And there we go, that is one Japanese stack down, and I'm guessing we're going to destroy another 4 or 5 stacks just in a few moments. There we go, another 40,000 men dead, and we are not getting a lot of war score from the battles that we have won, because I guess they have so many other countries that are on their side, so the war score calculations are probably a bit botched, but you know, it's still Japanese men that we're killing, and I'm not going to complain about that. We have also managed to win the siege of Mashiki, which does sit at a pretty convenient location in the middle of Kyushu, so we are slowly going to move our armies northward and start sieging down some of these northern fortresses as well. And we have more Japanese troops arriving in the island. We have another 45,000 men that we are going to kill off very soon, because basically the entire army of Ashikaga is made up of levies. They aren't even hiring any mercenaries, so I'm not quite sure what the situation here is all about, but we are just able to stack wipe them effortlessly. And of course, these men are going to die very soon. And there we go. They're very much dead, and our armies still remain triumphant. We're about 1 year into the war, and the island of Kyushu has basically been fully occupied, so that means it is time to move to the northeast, and we're going to start occupying Ashikaga lands in the main island as well. Or maybe not, because we actually managed to suffer a major defeat. I'm guessing even though Ashikaga does not have a lot of regulars, some of their vassals, these daimyo, do definitely have them, so we probably met up with a bunch of their regulars, and therefore we got wiped. But fortunately for us, we suffered minor losses to 2 Tumans, So we will be able to send them back to the homelands, get them to recuperate, and then bring them back to the island of Kyushu later down the line. But before sending them back to the mainland, I'm of course going to allow them to take revenge on the Japanese for the casualties that they suffered earlier. And that's going to be 2 Japanese stacks dead, with relatively minor casualties to our own forces. Kyushu is once again almost completely under our control, and that means we are going to cross the straits for good this time. So I'm going to start occupying some of these locations, and in the meantime, let's see if we can actually annex some of the smaller daimyo in this region. Well, apparently not, because they do count as loyal subjects with limited diplomacy because of this, the Yamato Union. Although it appears that we can separate peace Yamato, and if that's the case, we should be able to demand the lands of their vassals in the peace deal. And well, looks like we got defeated again. I guess the Japanese vassals really are murking up at last, so I'm not sure what to do at this point, because the troops that we have in Japan probably won't be enough to win us the war, so we'll probably have to hire a couple more Tumans in the mainland, and that's going to increase our army maintenance significantly, but I guess it's all worth it for the conquest of Japan. Well, at the very least, they are decent enough to cross the straits in smaller stacks, and we are able to simply wipe the stacks that they sent towards us, so it's not like we are going to lose the occupation of Kyushu. It's just simply that we will not be able to gain any more lands in the Japanese mainland. And we are inflicting heavy casualties on the Japanese as well, so I'm guessing that stack was mostly composed of mercenaries, and the domain of Shiba did lose a lot of mercenaries in this way. We also managed to unlock the additional Mercury Patio level, so of course I'm going to queue up a bunch of those, and it appears that some of these Mercury Patios are not employing any laborers, which is just nuts. But, well, you know what, we're just going to queue them up anyways. Also, 1 additional 2-man has been raised in our homelands, and they're ready for transportation to Japan, so of course we're going to send them over, and once the second 2-man here is also done being raised, we will probably have enough of a local superiority to be able to push the Japanese back further east. And with that, we have nearly 40,000 men in the area, so of course we are going to start moving north. Hopefully, we will be able to destroy any resistance to our advance. And so far so good, we are managing to destroy a couple Japanese stacks, including some regulars, and hopefully we will be able to keep marching east until the Japanese shogunate simply collapses and gives us the peace that we want. Well, that was one massive battle, and at the end of it all they outnumbered us 3-1, 4-1 even, but we still managed to win, and out of all of that we got 0.43% war score. So yeah, it's probably going to be a bit difficult for us to get what we want simply by winning battles. And this is just absurd. The domain of Shiba have unconditionally surrendered to us, but we can't actually piece them out because they're a loyal subject with limited diplomacy, because of course they're part of the Hosokawa Union, so I have no idea what I'm supposed to do here. I'm guessing we're going to start getting a lot of war exhaustion if we do not piece out everyone and not just Shiba very soon. Luckily for us, 2 of our 2-mans have recovered in our homelands and they're willing to join the fight again, so we should be able to use them to destroy the Japanese stack over here. Unfortunately, they managed to escape us, but as you can see, we are making a lot of progress towards occupying this entire region, and I presume that in a couple more years we should be able to get to the city of Ako, which is the war goal here. So that's going to give us an additional 25 to 50% war score, and then we should hopefully be able to take over the lands of the Ashikaga shogunate. Or maybe not, because the Japanese really are coming at us with everything that they've got, and their armies are simply endless. Although we have managed to destroy 2/3 of their armies, they still have more than 200,000 men, and their men are concentrated in this particular area. So this war is probably going to drag on for a few more years at least. And finally, by occupying the northern forts in Ishii and Mita, we actually have opened up the way to the city of Ako, which is the war goal, so we are going to try and capture it, and if we manage to do so, the tide of the war will certainly turn towards us. That was certainly anticlimactic, because apparently the fort here is not garrisoned because they just decided to mothball the city forts, I guess. So we managed to capture it. And now it's just going to be a waiting period until the ticking war score is erased, and at that point we should be able to dictate terms to the Ashikaga shogunate. Also, it appears that we can start getting some separate pieces with the other daimyo, so from the domain of Noto we are of course going to demand full annexation, and that gives us our first 3 locations in the islands of Japan. But before piecing out everyone else, ideally I would like to occupy the city of Kyoto and the location of Funai, because both of these locations have buildings which belong to the Yamato court, and we ideally want to get higher war score against them, since they have a lot of subjects in the war, so by getting war score against Yamato, we will be able to take land from their subjects. And I'm not quite sure whether this will actually work. Maybe they changed how building-based countries work in the current version of the game, but assuming that this works, assuming that we can get a 100% war score against them by occupying these 2 locations, in that case, we will be able to take a lot more land out of this war. And as it turns out, Kyoto was also basically undefended, so we were able to capture it within 19 days, and that gives us 99% war score against the domain of Yamato. But for some absurd reason, we still can't take any lands from their subjects, or rather union partners, which are part of this war, so I'm going to try something different here. I'm going to try to send them, let's say, a white piece. And then I believe that still leaves their junior partners as part of the war, so now we should be able to request separate peace from them. But alas, it does not work like that. Even though their overlord is not part of the war, these subjects still can't be separate pieced out, and as you have just seen, we can't actually do anything about the overlord either, so this is just a bit of an issue, let us say. Or maybe the Yamato Union dissolved because the Kitabatake Union has taken its place? I'm guessing it's a case of seniority switching between partners. So now we are actually able to separate piece out Kitabatake, and by piecing them out, we should probably be able to piece out their remaining union partners as well. Also, this is pretty hilarious, but the Kingdom of Goryeo has actually joined the war, so I guess that's another enemy that we will have to deal with now. I'm just going to send 1-2 men over to their capital, and we will try to piece them out by just occupying their capital, at which point they are probably going to accept a white peace. The Korean capital has fallen, and obviously they're willing to peace us out. I'm just going to get them to annul their treaties with Ashikaga, because I'm fairly confident that they're not co-belligerent, and as a result it would take a lot of war score cost to take any lands from them, so it's probably going to be more efficient to wait for 5 years and then take their lands later down the line. And we can also piece out the domain of Hosokawa for nearly 100% worth of peace, so of course I'm going to do exactly that, taking a bunch of lands from them. And I suppose that the next target is going to be the domain of Kitabatake. As it turns out, the next target ended up being the domain of Shiba, because for some reason I guess we managed to piece their overlord out or something like that, and they're actually willing to give us some land now. Unfortunately we can't take their heartlands, but there will be further wars of conquest and we will be able to annex them later down the line. For now, their lands in the western reaches of Japan will be more than sufficient. And it certainly appears that we have won the war of attrition, because the Japanese are down to their last 50,000 men, half of which belong to the domain of Kitabatake, so of course we'll have to drop down on them and destroy their armies and take their capital before we piece everyone else out. So I'm going to send 2 two-mans, 22,000 men in total, over to the domain of Kitabatake, and we will attempt to capture their capital. Strangely enough, their armies are nowhere to be seen, so it looks like we're going to capture their capital without facing any major opposition. And funnily enough, the Ashikaga shogunate has unconditionally surrendered to us. So now we are probably going to have to take over these smaller independent domains very quickly before our war exhaustion reaches unattainable levels, and then we are going to try and piece everyone out of this war. The Kitabatake capital has fallen, but we still need to occupy this fort before we can actually take over their lands, so that's going to be exactly what we'll do. And by occupying their capital, we are able to take over significant portions of the domain, and hopefully we will be able to take the rest of their lands in the next war against Ashikaga. And with that, we have just enough Saigoku Pops living in our country to be able to make them an accepted culture, so of course I'm immediately going to do that, which will significantly reduce the amount of unrest that is being generated in our newly conquered territories in Japan. Well, our war exhaustion is pretty high right now, and I believe it is time that we made peace. I've managed to annex a few smaller domains here and there, but for the most part, we can't get a lot of separate pieces because of this silly union mechanic. We can't even piece out Yamato itself, so this just makes no sense. But anyways, we're going to piece out everyone else that we can, and finally we're going to get all the lands that we demand from the Ashikaga shogunate. And from Ashikaga we're going to get all the lands that they themselves hold in Kyushu, all the lands that they hold in this smaller island, and just this single location in the Japanese mainland, because that is all that we can get for our current war score cost. And with that ends the first Mongol-Japanese war. And trust me, it is going to be the first of many to come. Unfortunately, it appears that we can't actually get any proximity in southwestern Japan just yet, but I'm fairly confident that once we get enough maritime presence in the East China Sea, we will easily be able to propagate proximity to the islands, and thus get just a tiny little bit of control in the island of Kyushu, which should allow us to keep the islands in check and prevent any patriot rebels from rising up. And while we're at it, I'm also going to add the Kyushu culture as an accepted culture, because of course we got a lot of these pops from our recent conquest. And then we're going to declare war again, because for some strange reason the domain of Koto was not part of our first war against the Ashikaga shogunate, and we are able to declare war against them. We're even able to threaten war against them, and strangely enough, as far as I can see, this will not bring in the Ashikaga shogunate, although maybe again the game is lying to me, so let's try it and let's find out. And as you can see, we are at war with a bunch of Japanese tags, but we are not at war with the Ashikaga shogunate, so we will be able to use this war to clean up the borders somewhat in the southwest and maybe even get separate pieces with Hosokawa and Kitabatake as usual in order to expand our domains in the central areas of Japan. It is quite convenient for us that if you are at war with a member of the Japanese shogunate, you basically get military access through the entire shogunate, so of course I'm going to make use of that to travel our armies through all of this area and start sieging down some forts which belong to the Japanese clans that we're at war with. Also at this point I've built a bunch of heavy ships in the East China Sea as well, which of course we're going to use to destroy the Japanese navies to ferry our troops around in the area of Japan. So of course I've sent one 2-man over to the island here, and we're going to try and destroy the armies of the domain of Hosokawa, and then we are going to try and get a separate peace with them in order to take their remaining lands in the west of Japan. And of course, our first battle against the army was a success, so now we are going to try and take down these 3 fortresses, which includes the Hosokawa capital, the city of Izumi. Also, it turns out that we are in luck, because the domain of Hosokawa was at war with the Ashikaga shogunate, and in the peace treaty they managed to take a couple more settlements in the center of Japan, so when we separate piece them out, we will also be able to take all of the lands that they have taken from Ashikaga, and through that we will actually have a lot of lands in the middle of Japan. And we have scored a major victory against the Hosokawa domain, so I believe that should be most of their armies that we have destroyed in the Battle of Nakajima, and we should easily be able to occupy their remaining lands and demand a lot of territory in the peace deal against them. And in the Battle of Izumi, we managed to score another great victory against the domain of Hosokawa, which has wiped out all of their remaining armies, so now we will be able to occupy their remaining lands in peace. Unfortunately, it appears that despite our best efforts, we can't actually fully annex Hosokawa, so I'm going to leave them with these two locations plus whatever lands that their vassals hold, and in the next war in Japan we are probably going to fully annex them and possibly even all of their vassals. And there we go. With that, we have actually managed to gain control over the great city of Osaka, which for some reason is a rural settlement. Even though it's supposed to be a city, that's very weird. I guess we're going to have to urbanize it ourselves, because this is going to be the site of our newly minted naval governor as soon as we have more than 50 naval. And our new conquests from the domains of Hosokawa have given us just enough Togoku pops that I can actually make them accepted culture, and soon enough we're also going to do the same with the Tohoku culture, which is native to the very northeastern edges of Japan. We can also get a full annexation on the Kitabatake domain and all of their vassals, and of course that is exactly what we're going to get. So hopefully by doing that we have managed to restore the domain of Shoni to independence, and it does appear that they are the new senior partner of the Union, so we should be able to separate peace them at some point. And indeed, by occupying their capital, I was able to get a full annexation on the domain of Shoni, so that's going to give us control over a large portion of the island of Kyushu, and I guess our borders really are being cleaned up nicely in the southwest of Japan. In the meantime, our truce with the Kingdom of Goryeo has run out, so of course I'm going to declare war on them as usual, and I'm going to use the two Tumans that we have in Korea to capture their capital Hanseong. And as the war in Japan rounds down, we are also going to bring in more reinforcements here. For now, it's just going to be us versus them. And I'm going to immediately send our armies to the city of Hanseong. And this is actually quite funny, but by declaring war on Goryeo, we have also dragged in the domain of Hosokawa, so now we will be able to get a third separate peace with them, and we will probably be able to annex them or at least get a bunch of their vassals to give up their lands to us. And it appears that we can take 100% war score worth of land from the war against Koto. I'm going to prioritize this area in the northeast of Japan so that we can get more of the culture here, that is the Tohoku culture, so we can finally accept them, and that's going to be the final Japanese culture that we have to accept. And with that, our domains in the northeast have also expanded significantly. But unfortunately, we still don't have enough Tohoku people living in our country to be able to accept them, so I guess we will have to fight another war against the Ashikaga shogunate before we can accept all 4 Japanese cultures. We also got an expand paved road network parliament agenda, so of course you guys know what we're going to do. We are going to build up a bunch of roads, but luckily for us, our capital has a road network reaching out to basically all of China, so we'll only have to get this area in the northwest, and then we can probably get more roads emanating out of our local governors in Kaifeng and in the 2 southern cities of China. And yes, that is just how much lag is being created when you're trying to build roads in a transcontinental empire. And we won the siege of Hanseong fair and square, so now we are going to pursue the Korean armies wherever they may have hidden from us. Well, turns out they did not hide from us, and they did manage to retake their capital, which is pretty bad, but at the same time we managed to go after them, and I believe that we have actually managed to destroy or capture the majority of their regulars, so now they're down to just 7,500 heavy infantry, plus whatever light infantry and heavy cavalry levies that they may be able to raise. So I suppose that ended pretty well for us. Also, 11,000 prisoners. That is just a mind-boggling number of prisoners. And I'm afraid they're all going to die. Hanseong has fallen a second time, and that means we can disperse our troops and start sieging down some of the other fortresses that the Koreans have, but probably they're going to unconditionally surrender to us without us having to occupy all of Korea. And there we go, that should be the rest of the Goryeo armies, so now their entire country is defenseless and we can just occupy their lands as we will. Meanwhile, in Japan, we have managed to occupy the capitals of all Hosokawa vassals, and you guys know what that means. It is time that we annex them all, and luckily for us, taking all of this land costs exactly 100% war score, so that's going to be it for the domain of Hosokawa. And it does look like we can get a 100% war score worth of peace deal from the Kingdom of Korea, so of course we're going to get that, and basically all of South Korea is going to be ours. So hopefully in another 2 or 3 wars we will be able to fully annex them. And it would be quite hilarious if we figured out a way of just fully annexing Japan before we finish the conquest of Korea. Though we're in a pretty advantageous position all things considered, Korea has become a literal rump state with only 4 or 5 provinces. We own basically a third of Japan, and we are going to declare war again in 9 years at the dawn of a new century in order to take more lands and possibly even the imperial and shogunate capital of Kyoto. And I'm basically going to take it easy for the next 9 years, just allow our treasury to accumulate a bit, so maybe we might be able to interact a bit more with the Middle Kingdom, because obviously we have pretty terrible celestial authority since we can't really afford to pay tribute. And then we will see what happens once the truce with Japan is over. At this point we actually have more than 50 naval, so of course I'm going to switch away the Admiralty regime, and in its place I'm going to pick up the Harbor Administration government reform. And as soon as we have recovered our stability, we're also going to slot in the administration of shipyards, so we're going to get a bunch of naval push, and we're going to get 2 naval governors, which we are definitely going to make great use of. And of course I'm also going to build up a pretty sizable navy of light ships, which are going to keep our maritime presence high both in the eastern and in the western seas. And we're also going to declare a short and sweet war in order to conquer the islands of Ryukyu, so I'll go for this, and we're just going to jump on them using the 39th 2-man. And there we go, Ryukyu have lost, we have won, and now we're going to siege down their capital. And after the fall of their capital Urasoe, Ryukyu was fully annexed without any issues. If Osaka has been turned into a city, it is going to be the site of our first naval governor, and I'm also going to grant this staple port privilege here for the additional harbor capacity, so we get more maritime proximity propagation all across the Sea of Japan. And we're also going to change the mandatory bureaucrat education government reform, because we already have a fairly decent amount of literacy, so we can switch this out, and in the next stage we will easily be able to take it back. In the meantime, we are going to change it for the administration of shipyards government reform, which will give us our second naval governor, which we are going to place in the city of Rhodes, and that's going to allow us to get a bit of proximity all across the eastern Mediterranean, assuming that our maritime presence is able to keep up with the proximity that we get. Of course, I'll grant another staple port privilege to Rhodes, and I believe we are also going to build a bunch of Zhishians in our newly conquered territories. And with our new naval governors, we are getting acceptable amounts of proximity in Japan, even though we still have a lot more maritime presence that we need to boost, and also in the eastern Mediterranean, where we have fairly decent amounts of maritime presence all across the Aegean Sea and well into the Egyptian delta. And I suppose the amount of proximity that we have here is going to increase over time as we get more maritime presence in the open sea tiles here and also all along the Aegean coast. But even now, the proximity and control that we are getting in the Constantinople market will allow us to open up all of the buildings that we had closed, and this is going to make Constantinople into another city of the world's desire. Of course, it is always going to be the second city of the empire after our great capital Hangzhou. In fact, with all of the buffs that we have to max control, we can actually get 90% maximum control in Constantinople, making it definitely a very worthwhile investment to build in this city. And similarly, we are able to get 65% effective control in Cairo, although that amount is definitely going to rise as we get more maritime presence over here and as we keep urbanizing the Egyptian delta and building more pound lock canals and bridges. And we have also annexed the Kingdom of Widin since they had succeeded in converting and assimilating their populace to the Mongolian culture, And in fact, most of Bulgaria is majority Mongolian right now, with the Bulgarians themselves being relegated to the status of a bygone minority. And at this point we have such an immense income that we can actually afford to pay into the tribute system, which is going to boost our celestial authority. Now normally this isn't ideal, you ideally want to get additional celestial authority from the number of friendly tributaries modifier, but we are having some issues with our vassals. I'm guessing it's because these guys are our vassals and they kind of throw off balance the calculations for the vassal loyalty. So for now we will actually have to increase our celestial authority by simply paying a lot of money, and with that we will finally be able to proclaim the remaining celestial laws that we did not manage to get past at the start of our new era. A new century is upon us, and with it, it is time that we declare war on the Ashikaga shogunate. Of course, we're going to threaten war for Kyoto, and that's going to be the third phase of our conquest of Japan. Our forces are immediately going to cross the border and start occupying important Japanese strongholds, and overall our plan here is to simply take Kyoto, force the Ashikaga shogunate to surrender, and take a bunch of their lands in the southwest. And Kyoto, nearly undefended, fell after a siege of only 66 days, and that means we have occupied the war goal. So now we are going to focus on destroying any armies that the Ashikaga shogunate and their vassals have raised, such as this one, which we simply wiped off the face of the map with minimal casualties to our own two-mans. And in the battles of Nomi, we have managed to destroy not only an Ashikaga stack, but also a fairly large stack that belonged to an assorted of their vassals. And we have won a fairly important siege in the island of Kyushu. With the aid of our vassals, soon the entire island will be ours, and after that we are going to demand all of these lands in the peace treaty. Meanwhile, the Japanese vassals are converging on Osaka, so of course we cannot allow that to happen. We're going to relocate one two-man to this area, and we're going to destroy all of their troops. And just like that, the Japanese have lost thousands of men, and now their forces are down to a third of their initial strength. And in the Great Battle of Takashima, the Mongol forces managed to completely wipe an army that was 5 times their size. This is amazing. The fact that our horse archers and artillery are still valid very well into the Age of Reformation is just amazing. And on the 22nd of May 1602, the Ashikaga shogunate have unconditionally surrendered to us, thus ending this phase of our conquest of Japan. And in the peace treaty, we are going to take a bunch of lands all along the Seto Inland Sea, and crucially, the shogunate capital of Kyoto, thus ending any claim to legitimacy that the Ashikaga shogunate might still have. And with that, we are the undeniable master of Japan. Once again, we have succeeded where our ancestors had failed. The Ashikaga shogunate has been thoroughly destroyed, and they are now a mere rump state, relegated to ruling the lands in the northeast of Japan, a position which they shall probably occupy for a few more decades until they are completely, utterly absorbed into the Great Mongol dynasty. And it certainly appears that the end is near for our spree of conquest, because we have achieved basically all of our goals that we have set out for this campaign. Now, the only areas that remain for us to take over are the remnants of Korea and Japan, and of course the Lord Republic of Veliki Novgorod, after which the Great Mongol dynasty will stretch all the way from the shores of Rome to the Pacific Ocean, and with it, the promise that we made to our illustrious ancestor Chinggis Khan will be complete. As usual, a quick look to our maps before we end this episode, and as you can see, finally there is some difference to the maps, because most of China is now Orthodox, and in fact, most of the steppes are also Orthodox, so overall Orthodoxy is gaining a lot of ground, and the plurality of our country is also Orthodox at this moment, with more than 100 million believing in the one true faith. Over the next century, I am pretty sure that all of China will become majority Orthodox, and we will also start seeing more Orthodoxy in places like Persia, Transoxiana, and Central Anatolia, the Levant, and even Egypt, which have been our rightful domains for quite a while now. Unfortunately, we are not seeing the same kind of movement in the culture map mode, and there are much fewer Mongols in our empire compared to Orthodox believers, but of course we are getting a slow but steady amounts of assimilation all across China, and I am using the assimilate area action quite judiciously, so we've got a bunch of majority Mongol areas along the southeast coast, and also some tiny little outposts of Mongolian culture in the Chinese hinterlands. And for some strange reason, we also have a lot of Mongols over here. I have no idea why this is the case. It's probably the fact that these areas are very sparsely populated, so the natural conversion or assimilation that we've been getting for the past 200 years has been more than enough to make these areas majority Mongol. And other than that, we are getting a bit of assimilation, as we have already covered. Bulgaria is majority Mongol, and it looks like we got a few outposts over here in these areas as well, because of course I did enforce culture on all of our western vassals, but they're doing a pretty terrible job at actually assimilating their people, mainly because the Ruthenians and the Russians have an enemy opinion of our Mongol culture. As you can see, all of the steppes, and in fact all of Persia too, have actually been cored automatically without me having to use any cabinet actions, and in fact you get a bunch of cores in the Fertile Crescent through this method as well. So overall our core situation is fairly okay. I'm guessing Tibet is going to be cored within the next 50 years, along with our remaining conquests in West Eurasia, and in the meantime I'm going to use our cabinet to core the new lands that we take from Korea and Japan. And then if we were to take a look at the proximity map mode, as you can see, we've got pretty amazing naval proximity all across Eastern Asia, and I guess we don't even need the naval governor in Osaka, because we are getting decent amounts of proximity propagation all the way from our capital Hangzhou. So probably as we keep conquering more and more lands in Japan, I'm going to move the naval governor somewhere over here. And if we look at the west, we also have an acceptable amount of proximity all along the eastern Mediterranean, and hopefully in the age of absolutism, with the advent of modern roads, we will be able to spread proximity to the inner reaches of Anatolia as well. And I'm probably going to build up a couple more navies in the Black Sea, because already, despite not having basically any maritime presence at all along these coasts, we are getting a decent amount of proximity push in this area, and I believe we might be able to get proximity as far as Georgia and Trebizond if we play our cards right in the Black Sea. As for our development map mode, it is not as well developed as you would expect from China, mainly because we haven't really spent a lot of effort in developing our lands, and to be honest, we don't have a lot of development modifiers either, except for the huge amount of prosperity that we're getting in a few specific locations. So overall, vast parts of India and even most of Germany and northern Italy have much higher development levels compared to our empire, and of course in the steppes, it's the steppes. I'm not even going to bother with them. So that's basically it for today, and before we go, our usual shout out to our members who have kept supporting me even through our recent period of inactivity. Thank you all to Dark vs Real, Miekyo123, Loghead, Monegas, Ganon Patton, Osvaldo Antonio Carmona Calde, Hunter Herring, Esteban David, Maychard, Kozma Yaskoviak, Melia Strada, Hagnat, Metal of Gangelt, Camrian, Zwegster, Jason Johnson, Tev, Alperen Bayraktar, Marcus Koas, Mert Baba, Brian Brady, Marco Berdeu, OA9490, Berkay Atıl, Gustav Bon, Osman Albayrak, VVS Vinicio, Yakup Eren Akyıldız, Mr. Pete Chandler, Chastity Chad, Ivan the God, Softy, Muzeli, Super Music Master, Raul Schopfer, Candy Arm, Bilek, Mikhail Aydemir, BK321, and especially our wargamers, Jacob Emrich, CH Dragoon, and Gustav2713. Thank you all folks, and I will see you all once again in the war room.